Everyone, please rise. We'll be led in prayer by President Pro Tem Bill Nash.
Almighty God, we ask for your blessings upon the members of this council as we assemble here in this chamber to conduct the ongoing business of our city. With your guidance, we will strive to ensure that all our decisions are for the common good and that your inspiration will instill respect, compassion, and thoughtfulness in all our deliberations. Give us the strength and wisdom to lead by example as the people's representatives, and that peace and harmony will mark all our proceedings and keep us faithful to the trust placed in us by the citizens of our community. Amen.
Amen.
Alderwoman Filbert, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, every day. Yes, but
Good evening, everyone. Before we begin citizen comment, I'd like to make a statement, which I think is appropriate under the circumstances. A couple of weeks ago, I was concerned greatly about how news is reported in our city, and I took it upon myself to call into a local radio program. While I did not say my name or an office or anything of that nature, I spoke rather strongly, and I'm not going to tell you that I wouldn't make that call again, but in hindsight, perhaps I went too far or stepped too far as well. Last week I met with our Bulletin's editorial board for about 2 hours, and I followed that up with a promise that I made them. I called into the radio station on Friday, and during that time, I apologize for a portion of my statement because I did go too far. If our city is going to move forward, we need all of our resources, and this is basically what I said on Friday to Stu himself, including the resources of the Bulletin, who's the oldest continued existing business in our city's history. So I apologize to them, and I apologize to all their staff, and I'm doing that again tonight because I think it's appropriate. And that's all I have to say on that matter. And thank you for your indulgence. We will begin tonight with citizen comment. First person signed up is Janet Koch.
Janet Koch, 35.5 South B Street, Taftville. I'm considered a newcomer to Norwich because I've only lived here 6 years. I'm also a renter, but that does not mean that I'm not a taxpayer. As a retired journalist, I know that without sunlight, democracy withers, and plutocracy, oligarchy, racism, corruption, and old boy networks thrive. I would like to object to recent public attacks on the Norwich Bulletin for fairly and neutrally bringing into the sunshine legitimate public information about this city's finances and this city's elected officials. In this century, a local independent newspaper is a precious endangered species. Nobody should be calling for its extinction. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Theodora, hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you.
My name is Linda Theodorou. I live at 37 Taftville Ockham Road. I am a single, older woman who manages to support myself and my granddaughter on my income alone. Nevertheless, I make it a priority to pay the City of Norwich what I owe it. I would never consider not doing that. Someone who does not do so increases the burden I and other taxpayers must share. Also, the last time I checked, this country is still a democracy with a Constitution and a First Amendment. The press has not only the freedom to, but also the obligation to, inform the public of the truth. I am a resident of Norwich. I am a taxpayer. I am a voter. You are members of the Norwich City Council. Your job is to represent my interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Joanne Martin.
Hello, my name is Joanne Martin, and I live on Clifton Place. First of all, I would like to say, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank you for your opening statement. It was the right thing to do. So my comment is regarding Alderwoman Philbrick's moment of personal privilege at the March 5 council meeting. I have to say I was troubled by the Alderwoman's comments, specifically the comparison of a story in the Bulletin about Alderman Nash to the reporting regarding her own ethics issues from 2012. The absurdity of some of those comments needs to be pointed out. The fact that an elected official would place blame, not on her own actions, but on the reporting of those actions, is what I find most concerning. The Alderwoman said that these issues were personal, inferring that they are not the business of the press. I disagree. Members of the press have a duty to inform the public and are responsible for insisting on transparency in government. The fact that Alderman Nash was relieved of a $19,000 debt to the city of Norwich is newsworthy to the residents of this city because he serves on the city council. Reporting the issue does not place the blame for that issue on the Norwich Bulletin, just as Alderwoman Philbrick's ethics violation was not the fault of the press. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike DeZivit. Where is he?
Good evening, Mike DeZavit, 248 Browning Road, lifelong resident of Norwich. Full disclosure, I am the president of Norwich Firefighters Local 892. Mr. Nystrom, I'd like to thank you for your comments this evening. But I'm going to take a left turn. With the upcoming difficult budget season upon us, I'd like to take time here to share a story. It's a story of dedication to one of its retired members. I'm here today to publicly give thanks to the Human Resources Department, HR as we affectionately call them. We don't see eye to eye on every issue, this is true, but taking care of the city's workforce with limited resources is a difficult job. I know that all our talented workers are asked to do more with less, but in fact, you can only do less with less. So City Council, I want you to please not to lose sight of all the dedication that goes on day in and day out in this city when staring at the bottom line. Norwich Firefighters just lost another retired member, Doug Smith, who served for the city for 30 years after he lost his battle with cancer just a little over 4 short years after retirement. Before Doug passed, there was an issue with his insurance. The issue was he was booted from it, which should not have happened. Of course, this happened while Doug was moving back and forth from rehab facility to the hospital, back and forth, and this continued for several weeks. Firefighters understand how to adapt and overcome, but hey, mistakes happen, and when you're Doug and you're a firefighter, you know to try to move forward. But when you're legitimately fighting for every day, his family and him and his family need answers, and they needed them quick. The family gave me permission to speak with HR on Doug's healthcare matters, and I spoke with Sandy, who started working the phones with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and that went past her normal work hours. She got back to me as fast as she could with clear direction. I was able to inform the family that we were working on a solution to that problem. The next few days, I received numerous calls from Pat, giving me updates and making sure Doug was getting what he needed. During the remainder of the week, we were able to solve all the problems and transfer Doug into hospice care. Tina and Bridget ensured all the paperwork was complete for his end-of-life care and always asked how Doug was doing and how they could help. Even though these insurance issues were not set in motion by the city or HR, in my opinion, everybody in HR went above and beyond. They could have given me the new names and the numbers for myself to work on, but they took it upon themselves to move forward. It's that dedication that's what makes Norwich great. It's the workers, day in and day out. I want to publicly say thanks to the people of HR on behalf of our firefighters, but most importantly, from Doug himself.
Thank you, sir. Diane Stone?
Good evening, Diane Stone, Harlan Road. Thanks to Alderman Philbrick's comments at your last meeting, I was made aware of the Bulletin's report of the bankruptcy of a sitting member of council. To be clear, I believe her comments were far off base. How on earth is the fact that someone who makes financial decisions for us is bankrupt not newsworthy? It may not impact his ability, but it's certainly a piece of information that we ought to know and that we ought to evaluate. And the fact that his bankruptcy means that we're on the hook for $19,000 that he was overpaid and by contract owes the city, that too is newsworthy. Having your business in the paper must really stink, and I wish the Nash family well, but as a public official, it is newsworthy. More disturbing than the actual issue is the reaction of the mayor, who did not offer any assurance to the public, but actually suggested that the city owes Mr. Nash. Sir, I thank you for your comments this evening, and I hope that they are reflected in your speech moving forward. Most certainly concerning was the reaction of Alderwoman Philbrick, defending her good friend. I'd like to remind all of you, that while you're sitting in these chairs, you're not representing your good friends, but you're representing the residents of the city of Norwich. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sherry Stone, I believe it is? No? Sorry, I can't read the handwriting.
Even if you could, it's not a Smith. So I'm Sherry Ostroud. I also live on Harland Road. I watched the council meeting on March 5th on public access, and I have to say I sat straight up when I heard Alderman Philbrick's startling and bizarre personal point of privilege remarks when she demanded the Norwich Bulletin be boycotted because the paper reported personal and private information about Alderman Nash. So I looked for the outrageous article in the Bulletin and found a headline that said, "Norwich Alderman declares bankruptcy, will not repay pension excess." City Council President Bill Nash will not have to repay the city almost $19,000 he was overpaid in pension funds because he recently filed bankruptcy. That is what the article said. This matter to me as a resident, it matters. If the story was about an ill family member or even an extramarital affair, I would agree it is a private matter. But personal bankruptcy and not paying the city back matters to me. As a city council, you all make decisions about when and where to spend our tax dollars. And we ought to know when you owe a debt to the city, and especially why it's not being paid back. You are the city's fiduciary, and it matters to me. As far as calling for the boycott of a city newspaper, a 227-year-old business, an employer in our city, because they reported information that is public record, this is really very, very troubling to me. I support transparency. I voted for transparency. So Alderman Nash, your bankruptcy matters to me, and your ethics violation matters to me as well, Alderman Philbrick. And I'm pretty sure it matters to most of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Haith?
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. I've watched these sessions on television. This is my first time being here, and I see this as a marvelous space. Okay.
Excuse me, sir. Could we have your address for the public record?
All right. I live at, even though I'm reluctant to do so, for reasons of, I believe that sometimes we have to look at public safety in terms of people giving out their addresses in the media, but I will do so nevertheless. I live at 39 Fanning Avenue,
Thank you.
Norwich, Connecticut. Bear with me, I'm somewhat of a methodical individual at this stage in my life. Perhaps I always have been throughout my life, but since I've retired, I realized that's pretty much what my DNA is. So I would like to say that I have experience working with the Mad Men in the Madison Avenue District in New York City. I worked with them, for them. So I just use that as a little attention getter. The Mad Men being the TV series that was on AMC television channel about the advertising industry in New York. So I'm going to try to get this done. I really didn't have anything set up other than to speak about our bus and rail and ride system are at risk, and anyone who wants to do anything about it, they're getting ready to cut the funds, and it's going to affect people economically, even if they don't use these public transit systems. I was told today that you can go to Facebook and there is a petition that the public can sign to urge them not to cut any funds from our transit. You can find out more about it if you go online and Google the subject of public transit and the funds being cut. The other thing I like to mention is I tend to write articles whenever I'm on the computer in the Otis Library. Is there a time limit here?
There is, sir. Yeah.
All right. So I just want to leave by saying I support the Reed Hughes conversion to vets housing. I'm a vet. And I also wanted to mention the title of the last article I wrote, which is entitled, Women's Journey is Our Journey. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak under citizen comment that did not sign up? Yes, please.
Beryl Fishbone, 19 Bliss Place. As we hear the words being used in the media, they begin to creep into our vocabulary while we don't know their precise definition. A word I began hearing on the national news has been creeping into the local vocabulary and also being used to describe local political situations and events. The word is collusion. I looked it up, and its definition, per Merriam-Webster, is a secret agreement or cooperation, especially for an illegal or deceitful purpose. I know that such is not the case here in Norwich, Connecticut, but I would like to remind you that much of the world is about appearances. On occasion, it's good to look at situations from afar and visualize how they might appear to those people not directly involved, how phrases can be misinterpreted. For example, there is a lot going on behind the scenes. Does that mean payoffs? Not quite perfect permits? Something sneaky and illegal? As we discussed in caucus, old-style backroom agreements. Did you drink the brandy and smoke the cigars? We can't disclose. Then why was it brought up? What's being hidden? We met on this date but can't tell you why or what was discussed. Then why did you bring it up? You have to trust us. It works in other places. There's a profit to be made for someone involved. We talked about it in the kitchen, don't you remember? That's a heart stopper. The people who elected you are thrilled you're speaking with your constituents, but they are also counting on you to do what is best for everyone in the city and not just one portion of it. That phrase means you are out and about, talking and listening, but your buddies and pals have an advantage not available to others. Modern policies speak of transparency, which the public not only expects but deserves. No more private discussions, but public discourse on topics that might be uncomfortable. Speaking of projects, the Mohegan Park Advisory Committee has a number of events coming up soon, and there is no money being requested. But your presence and that of the public is always welcome. I have a second, so I'm going to use it. On Sunday, Earth Day, April 22nd, a cleanup and refreshing of the trails is going to be done from noon to 4 p.m. On Friday, April 27th, Arbor Day, the Norwich Tree Wardens will be presenting a program at Moriarty Environmental Magnet School. The public is welcome. Please sign in at the office. We're also inviting everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak under citizen comment? Yeah, sir.
Good evening. David Krebs, 47 Prospect Street. The first page of my two-page handout comes from this pamphlet. Lists the 12 members of Mayor Hinchy's Economic Development Strategic Plan. I recall an Arab proverb about the camel being the result of a committee that designed a horse. The second page, dated May of 2013, is timely. College bubble bursts after decades of extravagance. And I ask, do Norwich taxpayers still pay for city employees' Cadillac health plans? When Congress staff complained about having to use Obamacare exchanges, Congress buckled and quietly legislated them to shift to the Witness Protection Program. Since they suddenly found exchange regulations and premium to be crying towel topics. The letter ended with a quote from humorist P.J. O'Rourke. If you think healthcare in the U.S. is expensive now, wait until it's free. Back to page 1 of my handout. This council needs to become very familiar with this strategic plan as soon as possible. 6 pages in section 1 and then section 2 on page 22 that leads with a comment. Comparatively high tax rate. Remember, this was 2011. Most of the strategic plan tables reveal the reason, beginning with table 1, with Norwich government employees receiving the highest pay in the area. There is another adage that people have drowned in lakes with an average depth of only 4 feet. Task the city manager to include a progress report about this strategic plan in his budget message. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak under citizen comment? Please.
Good evening. Andrew Harvey, 71 William Street. And I am here tonight to speak on behalf of supporting the Reed and Hughes building. A while back, before NCDC shot down the grant and before this, yes?
You do have an opportunity to speak under the next portion of our program on the resolutions, if you wanted that to be part of that same body of comment together.
Does it matter? I mean, whether I
no, but just to let you know, you have that other opportunity.
Okay. Well, I'm here now.
Okay.
I'll thank you.
Yeah.
I'll finish up. So, not too long ago, I think when you were mayor previously, Reed and Hughes building was supposed to be a linchpin of downtown development, and I'm basically just wanted to express my support for the city council's support of that project going forward, and resolution number 8. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else under citizen comment? Yep, sir. Over to the left.
Good evening, Greg Rippo, 209 Boswell Avenue. I have 3 minutes. What can I discuss in 3 minutes? I can bring up the vindictive Board of Review, AKA Blight Department again, but I won't. I can also talk about the city-owned 13 Baltic Street and how the piles of bulk waste and garbage have been accumulating there, but I mentioned that here a number of months ago, and it fell upon deaf ears. I can also add in the derelict house at 72 Baltic Street that had a fire in August 2013, but that never made it to the blight list. Procedure, people, procedure. I could also pat myself on the back for haranguing the BOR committee about 109 Baltic and finally getting the house torn down, but I won't. Let's not bring up the Sanctuary of Love building again either. Let's not discuss the next Reed and Hughes, the YMCA. We still have another 15 years or so to talk about it, right? 2 minutes and counting. We could talk about minutes and how the City Council minutes of December 18th, 2017 do not accurately reflect the truth of what I said, but we won't, will we? Shame on us. But good news, Betsy, you don't have to keep accurate minutes in regards to citizens' comments. In fact, you don't have to keep minutes on citizens' comments at all, according to the wisdom of our state statutes and the Freedom of Information Department. We could talk about the last City Council meeting held 2 weeks ago. Let's talk about what was said here 2 weeks ago. Alderman Philbrick lambasted the press for discussing fellow City Council members and her own victimization. Joanne, that's their job. Good news or bad news, news is news. Let's talk about how Mayor Nystrom emphatically declared how NCDC was a separate entity of our local government and how he didn't want to know or know anyone on their board. Really, Mr. Nystrom? Allow me to introduce you to our city manager, Mr. Salamone. Also, have you met City Council member Ms. Stacy Gould? Oh, my remaining minute. Speaking of minutes, Ms. Gould, I would discuss the minutes or lack of on the NCDC webpage. Where is the transparency and oversight due to the Norwich taxpayer? In closing, Article 4, Code of Ethics, Declaration of Policy. The proper operation of municipal government requires that all officials and employees be independent, impartial, and responsible to the citizens of the community, that government decisions and policy be made in proper channels of the governmental structure, that government public office not to be used for personal gain, and that the public have confidence in the integrity of its government. Integrity. Maybe we should talk about integrity sometimes for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Bowie.
Good evening, Rodney Bowie, 62 Roosevelt Avenue. I'd like to take this occasion to thank every Dolliver for putting forth an honest effort to try and keep the Board of Education budget down. I've spoken on the budget probably 50 times since I've been here. And it is, I'll quote it again from 50 years ago, a locomotive driving the city. So I would like to thank her for an honest effort. It is the main responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, of this town. Now, when it comes to what's news and what's private, I think the Bulletin needs to remember, first of all, that they're supposed to be a community newspaper. In the 50-some years that I've been here, I've realized that it was a totally Democratic paper. Totally. The news is slanted in that particular direction and has been for the past 50 years. Now, you can say, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I get the Wall Street Journal every day, and there's a lot of news in that that could actually be reported in the Norwich Bulletin, but it's not. So I would like, as you go through this budget season, to remember that we're paying taxes, but our children are also paying taxes. And before you start bonding something out, again, realize I'm not going to pay for it. I'm 77 years old. And a bond issue of 20 years, I'm not going to pay for it. You are.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else under citizen comment?
Good evening. Marvin Ceruto, 100 Star Street, Norwich, Connecticut, United States of America. This has nothing to do with politics, but the address of 13 Baltic Street was brought up. I grew up across the street from 13 Baltic Street. That's the home of Robert Pendergast. We lost Bobby at Quang Tree in 1970. We lost him on April 13th, and he was born on April 1st in 1950. His birthday's coming up. So I would just hope, and this goes for any property here in Norwich, that sometimes it's more than just a piece of property. There's a lot of fond memories there, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else under citizen comment? Anyone else under citizen comment? Third and final time. Anyone else like an opportunity under citizen comment? Seeing none, I declare it closed, and thank you all.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes?
Before we continue, I request a moment of personal privilege.
It's yours, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to speak for a moment on the comments heard tonight regarding a free press. I believe that elected officials have a right to privacy in their personal lives, in spite of their elected office, up to a point. I believe that news organizations have a duty to hold power accountable to the people it serves without influence or pressure from the government, whether the elected officials like what they report or not. I personally find no joy in the news reports about other people's personal struggles. But I also believe that it was wholly inappropriate and disrespectful for a member of this council to admonish and rail against the media from this dais. When we insert ourselves into the community in the name of our elected office, we must defend the constitutional right to free speech and to freedom of the press within the limits of the law, even when that speech consists of things we detest or would not say ourselves. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your opening statement. And I thank you for the humility it shows. Having said that, I'll end with a quote from Thomas Jefferson, slightly paraphrased. It goes like this, quote, "The basis of our government being the opinion of the people, the very first objective should be to protect that right. And if it were left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate for a moment to prefer the latter." End quote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I yield the floor.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Mayor, may I have a moment?
Yes, you may.
I really hadn't intended to speak on the subject tonight, but first I want to apologize to Alderwoman Philbrick and the mayor for having to feel the need to defend me in public. I've spent my entire life, since 17 years old, protecting and defending people, whether through the military or the police force, or as I do today, continue to protect the cadets at Coast Guard Academy and students at Mitchell College, with my life, if that calls for it. 2010, I lost a very lucrative job. I went from $80,000 a year to $12,000 a year. I managed to get the second year to $16,000. As you can imagine, everything I had was taken or lost. I went from a $200 grocery bill for a family of 4 in a year to $120 of groceries to a family of 4. My daughter got married, moved out, gave a little relief to the financial obligations to feed my family, to heat my home that they eventually took from me, my car, which they eventually repossessed. I struggled since 2010. I want you to know I was not collecting a pension in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, or 17. I did not collect my $24,000 a month for breaking my back in the line of duty. This wasn't a softball injury, a ski trip, a race car, a scuba dive, walking down the street. I was injured working for the city of Norwich in the line of duty. My family has suffered greatly financially through this, and I'm not crying to you about it. I'm sorry that I let the citizens of Norwich down. But I'd reached a point through some liens where I was unable to modify the loan on my home, that I was unable to clear. There was some nefarious activity from a former business partner that I needed to struggle with. Okay? Those stuff didn't make the paper. The fact that I filed bankruptcy after paying half of the debt, which I still don't understand how that occurred. I only made $24,000 a year and hadn't been paid a pension since 2010. I retired in 2003, and I didn't have a job until 2007. So therefore, I'm not sure where the debt came from, but I took the debt. I didn't argue it. I said, okay, fine. I did my obligations. I fulfilled what the city asked me to do each and every year as a disabled pension receiver. I did my job with them. I don't know what happened on the city side, but as some people say, Bill, you should have known. I didn't. I wasn't paying attention. I was trying to survive. So I apologize. The $19,000 that I owed the city of Norwich due to an overpayment, when I filed my bankruptcy, if anybody in here, and I'm sure there are few, as I've been reached out to by many in our community who've explained to me their personal bankruptcy stories, I wanted to keep the $19,000 separate and continue paying that debt because I am a city official and I take great pride in sitting here and the respect that the citizens of Norwich provided in me and voted for me here. But as my bankruptcy lawyer informed me, you can't do that. If you hold that out, then the whole bankruptcy can become invalid, therefore you owe all the debt. So there was nothing I could do about that. I tried. I want everyone to ensure that concerned about me being fiduciary up here and handling city finances. My bankruptcy, I'm assuming, is public information. Since back in July, I was warned by a person that this could be potentially extremely politically embarrassing and it would come out. I was made sure of that in July by another member from a different party at a meeting that this was going to come out. They were going to make sure of it. And it did, and I want to thank that person because at least it's a load off my shoulder. I've sat here for 4 terms. My second term, I have not done nothing but tell you people, every voter, every citizen, every taxpayer, I'm struggling. I understand your pain. I know what's going on. I feel every dollar that comes out of my pocket because I don't have any money of my own. I'm struggling. Everyone knew that. I never lied about it. In fact, there are people sitting up here and said, Bill, stop talking about it. But I wanted you all to know that I sit here broke, trying to do the best I can for each and every person who voted for me because I know what it feels like to feed your family or to put $30 worth of diesel fuel in your oil tank to get you through the couple of days in the winter so that you can keep going. I know what it feels like. Again, I apologize to the mayor and to Alderman Philbrick for having to defend me. It crushed me to know that I sit here at 55 years old and had to file bankruptcy and start my life over again and support my family. But it really hurt more that I had 2 members of the council defending me when I shouldn't have had them do that. I should have stood up and said something. But in reality, I just wanted to move on and get the city's business done. We have budgets coming up. We have fire trucks we need to buy. I just wanted to move forward. So, if anybody wishes to discuss with me my personal financial issues, please, please, I implore you, call me. Because there's not one debt on my financial obligations that I had to surrender that was a personal debt. It wasn't frivolous credit card usage. It wasn't trips to Disney. It was all money that I couldn't pay back from going from 80 grand to 12. That's where I stand. If you support me, continue, fine. If not, I can leave this council and I can hold my head up and know that I've done an awesome job for the city since I've sat here. And I will continue, if the citizens allow me to continue working for you. That's all I got to say. And I hope this ends this stuff. I'm not mad at the Bulletin. Had a great conversation with Mr. Conrad. The young lady back there was very respectful and polite when she interviewed me regarding it. But I was just hoping to move on and save my family the embarrassment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Appreciate the time.
Alderwoman Philbrick.
This is difficult for me also, and I know that many of you have a preconceived notion. I saw the meeting in the hall before the meeting, comparing of the notes. I had many calls from people in the community who gave me a heads up about what was going to transpire here tonight. Those of you who know me know that I have always been my own person. I speak my mind. I respect the fact that some of you don't agree with me. But to paraphrase one of the ladies' comments back there, it's my First Amendment right. I did this under a moment of personal privilege. I have as much right to express my opinions as you do yours. And for the record, I never called for the boycott of the Bulletin. I never mentioned the Bulletin by name in my tirade, if you will. I could mention someone by name, but I will not. Bill is my friend. Stacy is my friend. Peter is my friend. Many of you in the audience are my friends. Do I give you preferential treatment? Do I ask you for things in return? No. But I will never apologize for standing up for somebody like Mr. Nash, or if some of you remember, it wasn't that long ago when Peter and I had a heated argument when he spoke very harshly about Chief Scan. And I did the exact same thing that I did for Mr. Nash. I asked people, who in this room is so perfect that you can cast stones at the rest of us? And I see some of you now with your exasperation. So all I can say to you is that I appreciate those of you that voted for me. I will continue to be my own person. And I will tell you quite frankly that once the budget season is over, I'm not sure that this is where I want to be anymore. Never in my life, at 75 years old, and I have participated in municipal government for many, many years, never in my life have I met a more vindictive group of people. I see you back there, Joanne, going, wow. If you had a problem with me, you could have come to me. But you've got your little political, I'm not running again. I'm not running again. So I will not apologize because I did not call for the boycott of the Bulletin. And I will not apologize for standing up in support of a man who is a hard-working, honest individual who has been supported by a majority of the voters in this city for years and years and years. So think of me what you may. We've all had our cross to bear. And someday it will be your chance. And maybe your picture will be on the front of the paper. You know what? Excuse me, Miss. No, I can see the little snide remarks in the back of the room. And and I will not be a part of this evening. So have at it. You're not a very nice group of people, some of you. Look yourselves in the mirror when you go home. And for the record, I vote no on the Reed and Hughes, because I was thrown out of that meeting too because I didn't agree. Sure, you can find other people to sit up there for $100 a month where people can throw stuff at you and talk about you. Shame on me, shame on you.
We will continue now. Next on the agenda is a proclamation. Is she here? Yeah. Janice, if you please come up. And I apologize, but I'm in the process of losing my voice, so I asked Bill to read to you.
This is a proclamation from the Mayor's Office, Peter Albert Nystrom, Mayor, whereas Janice Thompson has been employed by the City of Norwich for 34 years, beginning November 21st, 1983, serving as the General Assistant Accountant, and whereas Janice has steadily been promoted and has obtained the position of Administrative Coordinator, which has been expanded to include the Rose City Senior Center, Youth and Family Services, and the Recreation Department. Whereas Janice has been awarded the Distinguished Service Award for Outstanding Achievement in 2001 for helping the establishment of the city's Safe Net community. And whereas Janice ran the backpack program for 14 years, writing grants to provide an estimated 10,000 backpacks for Norwich children, and whereas Janice has administered the Kingship Reese Wright program, making Norwich Human Services the only agency permitted by the Connecticut Probate Court to direct result and financial and accounting expertise of Janice and a couple more. Whereas Janice was instrumental in helping in opening the Municipal Child Care Center, providing quality child care to the children of Norwich employees, and whereas Janice wrote Garner, the administrated numerous local, state, federal grants, bringing millions of dollars of aid into the City of Norwich, saving taxpayers untold dollars, and is responsible for many other endeavors, too numerous, really, to list on this one proclamation over the course of 34 years of service. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Peter Albert Nystrom, and the City of Norwich City Council President Pro Tem William Nash, on behalf of the Norwich City Council and the citizens of the City of Norwich, do hereby thank Janice Thompson for her hard work and dedication on behalf of the City of Norwich. Signed, this date, Peter Albert Nystrom and Pro Tem William Nash. Thank you so much.
Although she is retired, I can tell you that we will still see her a couple days a week, as she's not leaving us completely. So that's the good news. Petitions, communications.
Petition and communication, number 1, an oral report from Jim O'Shea of Achievements Unlimited of Connecticut regarding the city manager's special meetings.
Jim.
So I will provide a very brief summary, and then certainly if you have any questions with regard to the planning sessions that we undertook It started on January 20th. We had a session from 9 o'clock in the morning until about 3:30 in the afternoon. We did a follow-up session on March 3rd in order to continue the process. And the result is a document that I believe you all have a copy of. Betsy, if not, I've got extra copies. So the goal here was to bring together the leaders of the city, especially given the changeover that the city experiences every 2 years with the elections and with a new mayor, to talk about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats faced by the city. And to do some sharing of ideas about that and things that the city could do to address some of those things. So the first session was very broad. It included the city council, the city manager, the mayor. It included members of the Board of Education. It included department heads. And it was a very broad discussion of those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. What we did, following up on that, was the assistant to the city manager, Jackie Barbarossa, and myself, we pulled together all the notes from that meeting, and then we looked to tie what came out of that meeting back to the plan of conservation and development, because obviously that's a longer-term 10-year plan that the city has. What we were trying to do is try to figure out, okay, what can we sort of focus on over the next 2 years, okay? So the second session was designed to, using that document, to try to narrow the focus a little bit more. And what we came up with was 3 core areas of focus for the city council and the city leadership over the next 2 years. One being economic development and infrastructure, number 2, public safety and quality of life issues, and number 3, the education system. One of the things that everybody agreed on is, even though the focus was what can we work on over the next 2 years, what should we put our focus on over the next 2 years, we did not want to just focus on short-term priorities. In other words, what short-term things could we accomplish in the next 2 years, but also what things could we move on in terms of longer-term priorities over the next 2 years, so that we didn't lose sight of and did not maintain a balance between short and long-term priorities. So do you want me to go through some of those short-term and long-term priorities under those 3 buckets? Okay. So under economic development infrastructure, the first of the short-term priorities was to focus economic development efforts on downtown, the waterfront, and what we termed the Golden Triangle, which refers to leveraging the synergy between the Mohegan Tribe, the Preston Development and Walkway, and the Norwich Downtown Waterfront and historical assets. This priority aligns with the Plan of Conservation and Development. The focus in terms of short term included the following initiatives: completing the Uncas Leap project and working to reinstate the Sachem Fund, work with the state to reconfigure traffic patterns downtown, particularly focused on Chelsea Harbor Drive, in order to support development downtown and on the waterfront, re-examine parking and a location of parking garages as well as signage for such in downtown, re-examine zoning regulations in downtown to ensure that they will work to support appropriate development of the waterfront in downtown, and work with the Mohegan Tribe on cleanup of the waterfront, including Shetucket Iron Works. And then the second short-term priority under economic development and infrastructure was to focus on the economic development needs of the villages and neighborhoods of Norwich, which is addressed in the Plan of Conservation and Development. This is a priority that NCDC and City Planner Deanna Rhodes are currently working on. Long-term priorities in terms of economic development and infrastructure, one was to continue to build a collaborative relationship with the Mohegan Tribe for long-term development of Norwich waterfront and historical assets. And again, this is addressed in the Plan of Conservation and Development. And then address flooding issues and mitigation in downtown in order to support long-term development. FEMA is currently working on a study studying flooding mitigation in downtown, and again, this is referenced in the Plan of Conservation and Development. Another long-term priority was updating the railroad lines to enhance transportation assets in support of long-term economic development, which is also addressed in the Plan of Conservation and Development. And then consider charter revision to stagger city council terms in order to support greater continuity of planning and follow-up on plans for the city. One of the challenges that I think was acknowledged universally in our discussions in these two meetings was that with the changeover every 2 years, it can be difficult to maintain that balance between short and long-term priorities. So that was one of the goals. It was, number one, to address both short and long-term priorities. But one of the thoughts that did emerge is that might be something to look at in the future. The second area of focus, public safety and quality of life. Short-term priorities make decisions on the appropriation of the $3.2 million bond for the city to purchase new equipment and trucks to ensure the best use of these funds to support public safety and promote quality of life in the city. Again, an item addressed in the Plan of Conservation and Development. Make decisions with regard to the future of Dodd Stadium. That was another short-term priority. And then long-term priorities in terms of public safety and quality of life that emerged from our discussions: consolidation of systems, including computer and communication systems, in order to support public safety and quality of life while working to achieve long-term cost savings. Number two, relocation of the police department. Revisit that at some point. And then continue to evaluate zoning regulations to ensure appropriate balance between development and quality of life in the city. And then the third main area of focus, the education system. Short-term priority was the funding of the school system, obviously over the short term and with the budget in front of us. The current system faces population trends and funding pressures, and tough decisions will have to be made. Again, this is an item addressed in the Plan of Conservation and Development. And then long-term priorities, the realignment and evolution of the school system over the next 10 to 20 years. The current system is not sustainable given current population trends and funding constraints. The city needs to consolidate and or realign the system and determine how NFA fits into the overall long-term vision for the city's education system given funding constraints. And again, this is certainly related to and aligns with items in the Plan of Conservation and Development.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes, Alderman Burnham.
Was this included in the public's packet? Like, do they see this anywhere?
It was not, but it'll be in the minutes.
Okay.
When the minutes come out.
And is this the final draft?
This is final at this point in terms of what came out of those two meetings. I mean, certainly to the extent that the city, this is really your document, it's not my document, okay? So you're certainly free to continue to evolve and change this. This is sort of a summary of what you came out of those two meetings with in terms of priorities, but those priorities can change, as we all know, right?
Yeah, no, of course, and this is great, thank you, and it was a great couple of days. I think, it was very enlightening and educational for us. But I guess to the council, what I would like to see added to this is some measurable outcomes and anchor dates, because there's some dates on here, but they're basically like, it would be great if we did this. But if it's easier to hold ourselves accountable to trying to incrementally implement these things and accomplish these things if we actually had goals to apply.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly relevant in terms of the short-term priorities you identified, because those are next 2 years. So some of the other things are longer-term priorities that might be difficult to put specific dates to those. But.
Right, but even so, as the plan evolves and transfers, and hopefully that this is the foundation of a plan that it gets built upon. If we say in the next 10 years, then steps can be made to try to accomplish those things and kind of be held to one North Star.
Sure. And I think one thing to keep in mind, this doesn't in any way substitute for the longer-term Plan of Conservation and Development.
Of course.
We wanted to make sure it was very much aligned with that plan. So, but I agree.
Alderman DeLucia.
So my question is, this document dovetailed into the Plan of Conservation and Development. What's next? Where do we start establishing the metrics by which we will measure our progress toward the goals that Alderman Burnham is talking about. 'Cause I'm saying, you know, what would your advice be, I guess, for us to keep moving this forward and getting to the point where we're actually measuring data on our progress?
Well, you know, it's interesting because we met in January and then we met again in March to work on this. I think you need to keep meeting, you know, offline. Not just as part of a city council meeting, but, you know, the kind of meeting we had, everybody lets their hair down on a Saturday morning. It doesn't have to be every other month, but periodically to try to put more meat on the bones here. So I would agree with you. I mean, there's more work to be done if you want to get to that level of specificity. But at least this, I think, helped you to narrow the focus a little bit. Because that plan of conservation and development goes on for many, many pages, as you all know, and there's a lot in there. And I think what you are looking to do, I know what John was trying to do, is figure out how can we really bring a little bit more focus to what we're trying to accomplish over the next couple of years. And I think this at least helped move you in that direction. But it's not the be-all and end-all.
Just one thing, I guess my hope is that it's not just about moving it forward in the next couple of years, but because we spoke during the meeting, and I feel very strongly that this needs to be a roadmap, and it doesn't matter which 7 people are sitting up here, the roadmap keeps moving forward, right? We keep traveling, I guess, along the roadmap is a better analogy.
Well, again, I think the longer-term roadmap, at least from my perspective, this is just my opinion as a citizen and as somebody who was involved in this process with the council, the longer-term roadmap is the plan of conservation and development. Now, one of the things that I do think is interesting when you look at the POCD and you look at the implementation tables, there are no deadlines associated with any of the strategies in there. It's all ongoing, ongoing, ongoing when you look at the timeline. So I think maybe that's a fundamental challenge that the city needs to address, is the fact that it's great to have goals. But at the end of the day, as Stephanie is very wisely pointing out, it's good to have a deadline or a time frame within which you want to accomplish something, because that brings greater accountability to the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jim, thank you very much for all your guidance.
My pleasure. And anything I can do to continue to help move this process forward, I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager's report.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. This is the City Manager's report for March 19th, 2018. The city was notified of the Opportunity Zone program, which is a new community development program to induce long-term investment in low-income communities. The program provides federal tax incentives for investors to reinvest unrealized capital gains into opportunity zones through opportunity funds. Each governor may designate up to 25% of the qualified census tracts in the state as opportunity zones, of which Norwich has 6 out of 9 census tracts identified by the governor. NCDC worked in conjunction with the mayor, the Community Development Office, Planning and Development Office, and Norwich Public Utilities to compile the information needed for the application. My office sent the application via email on the due date of March 16th. This could create a significant opportunity for long-term investment in the city, its waterfront, and the downtown. Thank you to all that helped compile and complete this information that was needed for the application. The mayor and I had a conference call from Betsy Crum from the Women's Institute on March 7th. After they were notified, they have not been approved for the downtown development bond through NCDC. Southeastern Council of Governments, in conjunction with the Southeastern Connecticut Housing Alliance, released the 2018 Housing Needs Assessment for the Southeastern region at a session that was held at Otis Library on March 15th. Some of the key points included the number of households in the region is expected to increase by 7,200 between the years 2015 and 2030. There is a potential shift in housing preferences of younger households looking for communities with more urban characteristics. And finally, hiring by General Dynamic Electric Boat will further exacerbate housing shortages. The complete report is available at the CCOG organization web page. Active shooter training for city office personnel was held on March 15th. 64 people attended one of the two sessions that were presented by Deputy Chief Chris Faraci and Sergeant Thomas Lazaro. Thank you to both of them for an informative presentation. The handout, quotes, "Avoid, Deny, Defend," was also sent to all city employees after the session. The city manager's office will be accepting neighborhood assistance applications until June 1st of 2018. A press release was sent to the newspapers and has been posted on the city's web page. I've attached the key financial indicators reporting the 8 months ending February 28th from Controller Josh Pothier, which coincides with the major tax collection and storm seasons. So you'll see that on the attached page. I won't go into that in detail. That concludes my report for this evening, Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions of the city manager? Alderwoman Burnham?
It's just a comment. Thank you all for working on the Opportunity Zone program. I think it's really great, and I think we probably have a good chance of getting some of our tracks chosen. I just wanted to, I don't know if you discussed or were aware of the potential unintended consequences of the Opportunity Zone program. And it's never, this is a new program, but I just think it's good to be aware that one of the potential unintended consequences could be, not that it will be, that investors will focus mostly on already improving areas because that's a safer investment. So as we direct developers and people wanting to invest in the city, it's just something to keep in mind as we prioritize. I don't know if that was discussed, but that was just in my research what I read, and I think it's great no matter what, but just something to keep an eye on so that as we direct people wanting to invest, that you know, it's not just focused in one area that's just less risky.
Mayor, if I may. I agree. The program is pretty competitive. I believe by the end of Friday there was 23 applications in, so, and only 25% of the zones in the state. So we have a long way to go before we see if we get the opportunity.
If I could address one issue you mentioned, the city itself, as all cities who applied, had to prioritize or rank the zones that they were submitting. And I can tell you that the zones that we ranked as the highest priority, it's somewhat being called the horseshoe because it runs from Thamesville through downtown, down Laurel Hill. And referencing your comment about where activity is highest, you will note that, and this is not a knock on TAFL, but TAFL's not in the first ranking. We not only looked at the needs of the city and the grand list itself, but we also looked at their proximities to other developments outside our borders, which has certainly stimulated interest from the private sector. And since all of these are private funds that really are being applied, if we are selected, or zones in particular are selected, we prioritize, I hope, what will become known as the highest needs areas. For example, 3 of our 9 zones do not qualify even for consideration, and those are our strongest grand list areas. You cannot even submit them for consideration.
No, thank you. Maybe I misread the email I got. Did have the first priorities. Maybe it's just the way that it looks on the formatting. The priorities are downtown Thamesville, Laurel Hill, Tappville, and then Greenville on the west side. We're not, just the way this looks here, it could have been formatted wrong or scanned wrong or something. But thank you.
There'll be a lot more to learn and discover about this. Even if we're not selected, this database that we now have has identified primarily every area for development across those 6 tracts in our city. So the wealth of information that our department heads and their department members now have has grown tremendously. So when individuals come in looking for development opportunities, we already have many of the answers that they might ask us to go find. It will be a useful tool in either way.
Great, thanks.
No other, okay. Citizen comment on resolutions is next. Nina Barkley is the first person signed up. Again, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Nina Barkley, Lathrop Lane, Norwich. I just am speaking on behalf of the Reed and Hughes resolution, and I'm sure that others will add far more depth and perception, but I feel that it's very important not to turn our backs on this project at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Massey.
Susan Massey, 1 Sachem Terrace. I want to thank Mayor Nystrom and Alderwoman Stacy Gould for sponsoring Resolution Number 8 to amend the agreement with the Women's Institute. Because the Reed and Hughes is our building, I mean, we own it, the city owns it, I believe that a commitment to the success of this project is appropriate and the right thing to do. I sincerely believe that the city's positive attitude toward development in downtown will attract more and more investment in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Rogers, please.
Hello, Christine Rogers, 75 Charter Oak, Hartford. And I'm here representing the Women's Institute. We're a nonprofit developer, and we're working on the Reed and Hughes project. So thank you once again for having us here. The Women's Institute has 36 years of experience working on projects like Reed and Hughes. They're all unique and different, and certainly Reed and Hughes has its own challenges. But in our history, we've completed over 2,000 units of housing, including commercial space. Some projects right here in your backyard, as well as projects in Massachusetts and other areas of Connecticut, including a veterans project in Jewett City that's been complete and providing housing for up to 20 veterans, and a historic project in Maria, Maine, in Willimantic that's getting ready to start construction. So we have a long track record of working on projects like this, and we appreciate the support that this project has garnered as we've been working on it over the past year at our expense. We have really been able to raise a tremendous amount of support from state resources and private funders, including the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, and other funders. But local partnerships are key on projects like this. It's critical to have the support of the local government. The Women's Institute is poised to begin the necessary stabilization work for this project without further delays. We anticipate approximately 4 weeks to get mobilized with our contractor, and it's just a matter of, placing the appropriate insurance, getting all of our subcontractors in line, and then a 10-week construction period. So we're really poised to get moving on this project as soon as we have the last critical piece of funding in hand. We're looking forward to bringing this property back to life, back on your tax rolls, and as an asset to the residents of Norwich, everyone in the downtown area, to really make it beautiful and make it shine. I'm going to be happy to answer questions. I'm sure there will be some later, but I wanted to give a public statement during the comment period. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Susan Augustiniak.
Hi, I'm Sue Augustiniak, 101 Broad Street, Norwich, Connecticut. I've been a resident here in Norwich for 34 years, 33 of the years co-owner of the property with my husband at 101 Broad Street. And I have to tell you, one of the things that had attracted us 34 years ago when we were moving here from the Midwest and trying to decide where in the region we were going to live, we were balancing off commutes to Providence and New Haven, so we had a lot of flexibility about where we would select. And Norwich attracted us both because some of the people that we met were so incredibly friendly and we just loved the area. That's why we stayed right in that neighborhood. But also because of the number of old buildings and the historic feel of it. It's something that you can't replicate. We came from an area that didn't have that. We love the area we came from, but it didn't have that. And it's so special. And I think sometimes people forget about how special it is and how important it is not to tear it down, because once you've torn it down, you can't recreate it. It's gone. So I want to also thank Alderman Nash and Mayor Nystrom, because a long time ago at the beginning of this journey, the two of you did support not tearing down the building. The rest of the council at that time was against you, but I did note that both of you did support that evening, and I wanted to thank you for that leadership that you showed back then. And I also want to thank you all for considering it and moving forward now, and the leadership you're all showing, because I do think it's incredibly important to the future of Norwich that we don't keep tearing these buildings down. Thank you.
Thank you. Gil Skillman.
Gil Skillman, 101 Broad Street. She's taken most of what I was going to say, so it's kind of tough. But I've had the honor and the opportunity to speak to this council several times on this and related issues. And staunchly in favor, of course, of resolution number 8, in support of rehabilitating the Reed and Hughes. And I have to say, we're talking about this tonight because of the positive measures this body has approved already to move this project forward. This is just one more step in that right direction. I don't think anything's changed about the fundamental underlying reasons. As my wife has already said, it's an investment in the historical uniqueness of Norwich. And she's already told you how struck we were when we moved out here and discovered that uniqueness about the jewel of a place that this is. And I'll just add how disheartened we have been over 34 years to see places that can't be replaced torn down and leave holes in the ground. Here's an opportunity not to do that, not to repeat that mistake. In addition, it's an opportunity to have a revenue-generating property up and going again. And third, here's a reinforcement of a reason that we've just heard from that report that was commented on earlier, that there's going to be an ongoing housing needs for this region. It's a small contribution, but it's a significant one to housing for the area, but also an anchor and a reason for people to be in downtown Norwich, to make it a more lively and even richer place than it already is. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Romansky.
Heather Romansky, 297 Scotland Road. Mayor Nystrom, City Manager Salamone, City Council members. I'm here tonight to share with you my disappointment with how the committee being proposed in Resolution Number 7, the 2018 School Facilities Review Committee, is being established. When I learned there was a committee in the works, I looked on the city website for information on its membership and found nothing. I reached out to Mayor Nystrom via text asking him to contact me, and I also asked again in person if he could find time for a short call. Since I'm still waiting for my call, I'm here before you tonight. As I continued to do my own research, I learned that there would be no application and interview process as there had been in the past, and that the committee, complete with members, would be appointed. I was a regular attendee at the meetings of the previous committee that was charged with school facilities, and sometimes a vocal critic. Perhaps that is why my name didn't appear on the short list of candidates for membership, and maybe why my calls go unanswered. Alderwoman Gould, Alderman DeLucia, as the council representatives on this committee, I'm asking that you ensure all stakeholders are included and engaged, that you lead your committee to do its due diligence, considering old and new ideas. Please ensure that every committee member at the table is heard and that the committee does not serve the personal agenda of a few. Finally, that you will make decisions and recommendations that are not only best for the finances of our city, but support the educational needs of our youngest citizens. Thank you very much. You know, I always appreciate the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you. The next person, the first time I believe, is Irene. Sorry, I can't read the handwriting.
I'm Irene Scheinberg, 12 Jones Court, Norwich, Connecticut. I'd like to say that I really dislike this process because I like to kind of interact. In my nursing career, you know, it's the importance of making a good assessment of what is needed. Sometimes I get, you know, long-term goals I find are difficult because day to day needs change. You know, they're kind of pie in the sky with long-term goals, but we're dealing with day-to-day realities here. The other thing in terms of, you know, I kind of have been in a part of a process with You're From Norwich, and there's a lot of feeling out there. And I'm not sure exactly how I feel. You know, I'm concerned about, you know, on one hand, I truly believe that you have to look at your market share. And also, you know, in terms of market share, you know, and your demographics, and what we are dealing with here in Norwich, it's very hard to, you know, kind of be responsible and know exactly what decision to make. But at the same time, you know, it's like, you know, we all make mistakes at times. We're not perfect. But the thing is, you know, what is the definition of transparency? I'm not sure about that. But how do we, you know, it's like even the healing process with what needs to go on, I believe the best way out is through. And appreciate people speaking their mind. And, you know, I wonder about a process that exists that kind of doesn't set us up for, you know, coming out successful. We're all part of a team and a partnership. You know, we have many feelings about Norwich, and we have a lot of assets here, and how can we best utilize them. But at the same time, you know, when you do embark on a project, you know, there are, you know, things that you don't, you know, that you may not expect. And, you know, I applaud putting in the $150,000. But at the same time, you know, if we uncover things and find, you know, that there are problems, how do we mitigate our risk? Because, you know, what is the potential of what can happen? But, you know, so anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Dale Plummer.
Dale Plummer, 25 Broadway, Norwich. I'm here to speak in favor of the resolution number 8 relating to amending the resolution regarding the Women's Institute. Thank you in particular to Alderwoman Stacey Gould and Mayor Peter Nystrom for co-sponsoring this resolution. The resolution will allow the Women's Institute to stabilize the Reed and Hughes building in preparation to its conversion to units for veterans housing and storefront retail space. As president of Norwich Heritage Trust, I applaud the council for supporting a plan that will save the city demolition costs, bring a property back to the tax rolls, and preserve an important historic and architectural feature of downtown Norwich. This will enhance the work already done nearby and contribute to the utility revenues of Norwich Public Utilities, something I think we always forget. A vacant lot produces no utilities. A building with apartment units and commercial storefront does. Norwich Heritage Trust, the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation, the Connecticut Main Street Program, Local Initiative Support Corporation have all worked toward the goal of rehabilitating Reed and Hughes. While the city's $150,000 is a small part of the total, it will encourage others to invest in this project as well. And I would, in closing, say this resolution is an example of good stewardship of historic resources in keeping with the council resolution on February 20th to seek designation as a Preserve America community. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Lee Fry.
Caroline Fry, 9 Indian Hill Road. First, I just want to say thank you all for your service. I think we all know Norwich has a lot of problems and struggles, and as citizens, we're very cognizant of all of that. And it's something we think about a lot. So the mayor spoke about resources, and I just want to reaffirm what I see as assets of the city. Norwich Public Utilities is a great source of pride. Norwich Free Academy provides the best education on a higher level. And then after that, we have Mohegan Park and our historic assets, from my view. And as many people have already said, once you tear down the Read and Use building, you have an empty lot, and it will never be replaced. I think you could say that Chelsea Gardens' destruction of Mohegan Park is very comparable kind of situation. Once you tear it down, you really don't have anything. And I think that that historic street facade is important to the look and feel of Norwich and hopefully Norwich's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Citizen comment is still open. That completes the list of those signed up to speak on the resolutions on the agenda, but if you would like to join us still. Yes, Mr. Bowie.
Good evening, Rodney Boyd, 62 Roosevelt Avenue. In the past, city councils allocated $800,000 to tear down Read and Use. I'm in favor of retaining the Read and Use, and I think we need to get started on some kind of movement to repair that building. As many of you know, I'm a landlord in the city of Norwich. I lost a roof, a large roof, this past season here. I secured the roof the next day, and I intend to have the contractor start this coming week. This is what landlords do, and that's what we are. We're landlords. We've owned a Read and Use for eons. Before we could ever sign an agreement to tear it down, you can fix the roof if you wanted to. And $170,000, $150,000 will go a long ways to putting a roof on the whole place. I know something about roofing. I've owned these buildings now for 50 years. And that is the first thing that you do when you own a building. You put a roof on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else under citizen comment? Yes, Mr. Kraft.
Again, good evening. David Krebs, 47 Prospect. I oppose resolution number 8, and it starts with the whereas number 3, that funding did not materialize. Well, how about that? I'll go back to when the city assumed possession. The city never winterized the building to start with, and everything froze up because they didn't put any funding into it, followed by the roof going bad because they never put funding into it, and it on and on and on until the inside of the building collapsed. And now all of a sudden, a wonder developer appears to going to rebuild Read and Hughes when it's nothing but a total wreck. It needs more than a roof. The stabilization is a tricky maneuver. How do you know the thing isn't going to collapse on a street and kill people? It's going to block off the Belltown for several years to do this stuff at the rate that the progress is going on. Now, my initial public comment talk addressed Mayor Hinchy's economic development strategic plan, which has numerous tables to speed up every process council has over the next 10 years. All you have to do is match all of these tables to what's going on right now. Now, instead of continuing with the whereas, you need to make one resolution or possibly two. The first is pay as you go. Instead of tackling this account, take it from next year's account, pay it from next year when this is going to take place. Don't take from this year. It is ending. And not mentioned during my public comment was the fact that when the city began this strategic plan of Mayor Hinchy's, the bankers wanted to raise the undesignated fund balance, or the rainy day fund, 2 times. Which came first? The aspect of the taxpayers of Norwich being overtaxed, which is in that strategic plan, or the city starting to develop a strategic plan? Cause and effect. We don't know which came first, the bankers or the strategic plan, but you ought to investigate that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Citizen comment is still open to anyone who hasn't had a chance? Yes, sir.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to say a few words. I mentioned earlier that I worked in the Madison Avenue district in New York back in the 60s with the so-called madmen. But, you know, sometimes I think, I've been in Norwich since 2008, and I don't have the best grasp of what is transpiring in this magnificent city. I'm from Stamford, Connecticut. Born in Norwalk, I have to put that in there. I was in the hospital for about a couple of days in Norwalk. But here's my point. Since I have a background in marketing and advertising research, I don't know what or if this city has ever entertained bringing in the madmen from Madison Avenue. They're not all bad. The way they're portrayed in the series, I don't even watch the series. It makes me sick. Well, you know, I mean sick. I just don't watch it. As I wouldn't watch any more programs about plantations in the South. I've seen enough of them. So I'll just drop that there. Madison Avenue marketing and reality show for a great city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to join us under citizen comment? Yeah, please. Welcome back.
Hello, my name is Tucker Braddock. I live at 868 Scotland Road, Norwich. And I would like to address Resolution 8. And my first interest in the Reed and Hughes building goes back about 17 years, when Jeff Lord and I got together and thought about doing something with it. And we ended up with a contractor in Plainfield, and we could never squeeze the trigger at the, poor metaphor, we'd never get together at the same time to do something about it. Then there was an opportunity for my hip tag grant for the state for $20,000. I think Mr. Champagne and I went together. It was $20,000, 10 from the state, 10 from the 10 from our city, to come up with an RFP to do something with it. Becker and Becker responded to it. They came into our town with their team and put a very viable opportunity together. The leadership at that time would not go to Hartford and support Becker and Becker. That fell apart. There have been other people involved in it, the NCDC and POCOP out of New York. Well, I think enough is enough. Today, as you all know, we had a minor collapse in the building, and that could prove even more hazardous to all. So I wrote this little thing, and it's called Oh My Darling. Oh My Darling. Tear me down. I have served the people well. I'm old and tired. My bones ache. I'm falling apart piece by piece. People walk by and say that I should be saved. I have spewed number 2 oil up from the sidewalk. Parts of me have fallen into neighboring buildings, causing a bit of a stir. I've pulled away from my companion building. My bowels are open to the stars at night. Please give me the dignity and let me go. I know from all of this a new magical creation will be, and that will be something that Norwich can be, all of Norwich can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else under citizen comment?
Thank you, Mayor. Brian Kovalar, 16 Hobart Avenue. I want to say first, I'm in general in support of resolution number 8. However, I do so with a caveat and a thought that I would like to express to the council. I spent a bit of time over the weekend rereading through the resolution, and there is one point of concern that I have. The source of funding. Right now, that funding is coming from the capital budget of the year. I spoke with Josh from last year's budget, or this year's budget. That amount was fully chipped back to the minimum required by the city charter. There is no 150 in excess, so you need to tap into actual funds that are mandated to be spent in a certain way by the charter. My question is, and this would be for Corporation Counsel to perhaps answer, is the stabilization of a building that is tied to an agreement with a private developer considered to be a capital improvement? If there's a question, it could potentially violate the charter. So therefore, I would recommend an amendment to ensure that the resolution is able to carry forward, the intent and agreement can carry forward, and that is to end up adding an or other funding as determined by the City Council. So you could potentially take Mr. Crabb's idea of pulling it from next year's budget during the up-and-coming budget hearings. It would help to ensure that a potential speed bump in the process is avoided. Thank you very much for considering that.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else under citizen comment? Anyone else under citizen comment? Yes, please.
Bill Block, 1 Sachem Terrace, Norwich. Good evening, Mayor Nystrom and members of the council. As this effort to save the Reed and Hughes has marched forward, I became curious when the last time a private enterprise erected a building on the site of a previously demolished structure in the downtown. My somewhat cursory inquiry indicates That building was the former Hartford National Bank in 1963. At this time, it's simply not profitable for a developer to build anything downtown without the historic tax credits. Demolition would only yield a vacant lot for the foreseeable future, and I'm not sure who would benefit from that. Fortunately, better judgment appears to be at hand, along with a developer with an excellent track record. So I'm deeply grateful to Alderwoman Gould and Mayor Nystrom for bringing this measure to a vote. As the retired purchasing agent for the city, I applaud this as a cost-effective thing to do. And as a longtime citizen of Norwich, I applaud it as the wise and right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else under citizen comment? Please.
William Allen, 25 Broadway, Apartment 11. I'm here to support Resolution 8 for the Reed Hughes. I want to thank Alderwoman Nash and Alderman DeLucia, hope I pronounced your name right, for replying to my emails. I spent the majority of St. Patrick's Day writing each of you personally. My apologies also to Miss Burnham. I completely deleted the body of your things and you only got the introduction. So my apologies. It wasn't just short, but thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else under citizen comment? Anyone else under citizen comment? Third and final time. Anyone else under citizen comment? Being no one else, I declare citizen comment closed. And thank you all.
New business, Resolution 1, relative to City Manager Salamone being hereby authorized and directed to execute a development agreement for property at 19 North Cliff Street.
I would entertain a motion to bring it forward, please. Alderwoman Gould, is there a second? Alderwoman Burnham. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. The vote is 7-0. 2, please.
Number 2, relative to the sale of beer and wine at Rock the Docks 2018 concert series at Howard T. Brown Park.
A motion, please. President Pro Tem Nash, Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Vote is 7-0. 3, please.
3, relative to the sale of beer and wine at the Taste of Italy at Howard T. Brown Park.
Motion forward, please. Alderwoman Burnham, second. President Pro Tem Nash. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Vote is 7-0. 4, please.
4, relative to holding the carnival hosted by the Norwich Noontime Rotary at Howard T. Brown Park.
Motion to bring it forward, please. Alderwoman Gould, is there a second? Alderwoman Burnham. Is there discussion? Alderwoman Gould.
I received a note from Vice Chairman of the Harbor Commission, Mr. Martin, and they have been very generous. The Harbor Commission has been very generous, and so have the fishermen and the boaters in the city of Norwich for allowing this carnival to take place. We have to close the boat launch for about a week, and that interferes with a lot of people coming to Norwich to fish and to put their boats in the water. So I will be supporting this resolution, but I would strongly urge the Norwich Noontime Rotary to do some due diligence and see if there isn't another venue within the city where they could hold this carnival so that we could have the carnival and the boat launch both open at the same time. So if you're not a carnival person and you want to go fishing or boating, you can do that, so that we have 2 venues open for everyone to use over the summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further comment? Alderman DeLucia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also received the communication from Vice Chair of the Harbor Management Commission, Jerry Martin, and I have to say that my response to him was really more about finding balance, that those of us on the Harbor Management Commission that sit up here maybe need to do a little bit more to find balance in the schedule, so that we understand that when issues or events come before the council, how they impact activities. As Alderwoman Gould mentioned, this is a prime fishing time in the harbor, and we need to find a balance, and we need to be more aware of how that is being impacted by these other events. Now, the events, I believe, are important because they give people reason to come downtown, and the harbor is central to our promoting downtown. But I agree, we need to be more cognizant of the entire picture when it comes to the harbor, and that comes right to me. I sit on that commission, and to find that balance so that we remember the purpose of the harbor as much as we want to use it as much as we possibly can to draw people into downtown. But I also will be supporting this measure.
Thank you. Is there further comment? I want you to know I appreciate what everyone has shared. Finally, the ultimate goal, I hope, and you will support this, is that we locate a new boat launch and make that a reality. And then we will have that balance in itself. No further discussions? Okay. All those in favor of the resolution? Anyone opposed? Then it's unanimous. 7-0. Resolution 5, please.
Relative to reappointment of regular member to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Motion, please bring it forward. President Pro Tem Nash, second. Alderwoman Burnham, is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Vote is 7-0.
You might just want to say who it is.
Pardon?
Who it is?
Oh, I'm sorry. For the benefit of the public, the person being reappointed is Peter Kuprak. 6, please.
Relative to an appointment of a regular member to the Commission for the Persons with Disabilities.
Motion to bring it forward, please. Alderwoman Stacey Gould, second. Alderwoman Burnham. Is there discussion? For the benefit of the public, the person being appointed as a regular member is Lori Ann Missouri. All those in favor? Unanimous. 7-0 is the count. Seven, please.
Relative to establishing a 2018 School Facility Review Committee and appointing members.
Motion to bring it forward, please. Alderwoman Burnham, second. Alderman Gould. Is there discussion? Yes, Alderwoman Burnham.
Yeah, just to address public comment, what was the parameters and vetting process for choosing the members that have been appointed or being proposed to be appointed?
I began, along with our superintendent, we met soon after the state of the city. We had several meetings. Her office, as well as mine, sought to get public interest in this. She handled the school side. An invitation was sent out to teachers across the district. That was my understanding. We only had one teacher actually asked to serve on it, as one example. There were a number of other people that were approached. They're not on the list because they declined. The makeup is of people who have had a history, who have worked hard for this community. There are some previously elected officials. You will note who they are. There are new members of our community that have stepped forward that would like to help parents, for example. I believe there's a PTO president as one of the members as well. The makeup itself is set at 11, trying not to get so large that it becomes unwieldy. The ex officio group, we are there simply to support their efforts, support the work that they do. The goal is to take the study that was last put together and all that data, to take what is valuable from that and move forward. It has been said by others, and I'll simply repeat, we need more available dollars for classroom instruction. And if we continue to operate all of these facilities with a grand list that showed growth again for the second year, but nonetheless not the kind of growth that can continue to absorb the contractual obligations that all our city departments face and that the taxpayers face. This is a long-term strategy to help address some of those cost issues, at the same time making sure that the curriculum that is offered our students is the best that we can bring forward and in the proper setting for them. A lot of the constraints we face are mandates from the state, restrictions on amount of square foot per student, depending on student needs. That is not unlike any other school district, but in our case, it is a daunting task. This is to prepare our schools for the future. And I hope I answered your question.
Plus.
If I didn't, I'll try better.
Plus so, yeah.
Any other questions, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, vote 7-0. Eight, please.
Relative to amending the resolution regarding the Women's Institute.
Motion to bring it forward, please. Alderwoman Gould. Second, Alderwoman Burnham. Is third discussion. Alderwoman Gould.
Christine, would you mind coming to the podium, please? I'm sorry.
Hello.
Hi, how are you tonight? Thank you for being here. I have a few questions that I'd like to ask. Does the Women's Institute already have stamped engineered plans for the stabilization?
My understanding is that we do not need stamped engineer's plan for the stabilization. We have architect's drawings, as well as a schedule of values from our building contractor. Once we get into the permanent phase, then we'll be at the level of stamped architecturals.
Okay. And would that be consistent? Mr. Trogger, would you mind? They don't have stamped engineered plans for the stabilization. They have an architectural plan.
I don't believe stamp plans are required to do temporary work, if that's what it is. If it's going to be permanent in nature, then we would be looking for stamp plans.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Next question. How much money do you actually have committed to date for the stabilization of this building?
Let me flip to the relevant section of my binder. And I should say that our funders have been very generous with us. We were planning on, moving forward on an earlier timeline. So lots of our commitment letters, the deadline for signing them was coming up. So we've been getting our commitment letters either extended or out the door to our funders, with the latest one being delivered by FedEx today. So for the Connecticut Main Streets, we returned a commitment letter to them for $50,000. For Capital for Change, that's the Veterans Housing Assistance Fund, we returned a commitment letter to them for $50,000. The Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation, we returned a commitment letter to them for $150,000. That was the one that was FedEx for today. And the Local Initiative Support Corporation, we sent in that commitment letter on March 16th. None of these loans are closed, and they all are going to have a myriad of requirements that we need to meet in order to actually have the funds in hand. And that is one of the challenges that we're now working with a capital stack of, more than one funder. So it's going to be a little bit of legal back and forth to get these closed.
Okay, so quick math, you have $250,000.
Correct, plus the local initiative support, which is where they want to take a lien on the property. And that's the one that is full recourse. That's the first commitment that we had. And they will go up to $450,000. That is for both the stabilization as well as the pre-development on the permanent side.
Okay, so quick math again, that's $700,000.
Correct.
Okay. How much do you suspect it will cost to stabilize the building?
When our contractor was last in the building, that was last February, we got a schedule of values that was $450,000. That did not include any contingency. We're carrying another $40,000 in contingency on that, as well as any potential escalation in prices that have happened in the last year. The contractor is scheduled to get into the building again later this week to check and make sure that there has not been significant deterioration. Of course, that would add cost. Under the terms of our development agreement, we're under the understanding that there have not been major changes to the property. That would be something that would have needed to be disclosed to us because it would impact our ability to go forward. We're anticipating around $500,000 in hard construction costs. That does not include any insurance, legal costs, architectural costs, and other soft costs associated with the stabilization, such as security and snow removal. We're ballparking around $700,000.
Okay. So you understand that if the council does decide to give you the $150,000 that you need, that we're going to come in last.
After all the grants have been expended.
After all of the other money has been expended for, if you need it, for stabilization. But you're telling me you think it's $500,000, you have $700,000, which leaves you $200,000 for your soft costs and your unknowns.
Our board has not approved using the full $450,000 of the full recourse that requires us taking title on the stabilization only.
Okay. So let's go back then. You have $250,000.
Correct.
And you might have $450,000, maybe.
Correct.
So if you have $250,000 and we give you $150,000, quick math, that's $400,000. You're still $100,000 short from your estimate just to stabilize the building, and you may need another $200,000 for soft costs, hidden costs.
Correct.
When will you know about the commitment for $450,000 or some part of that money?
Yep.
Because I want to get this, if we're going to do this project, we need to get it started. But if you don't have the money, I can't see you spending $200,000, then waiting a month, and spending $100,000 and waiting a month. When will you know, or when will we know, that you have a firm commitment for $450,000 or some portion thereof?
We have a firm commitment, and we have returned the commitment letter to the Local Initiative Support Corporation. Our board has approved us moving forward conditional with local support, as we discussed at the last meeting. They feel strongly, as do we, that local support be an important part of this funding package. And so we have the conditional approval of our board to move forward immediately pending the local support.
So basically what you're saying is if the council approves the $150,000, your board is going to approve the $450,000.
I can't speak for my board, but that's my understanding based on their conditional vote, yes.
Well, unfortunately, this is going to lead me to another question.
Absolutely.
What happens if your board says, well, the city council voted to give you $150,000, but we're still not comfortable with this project? What happens to this project now if they don't give you the $450,000 that you need towards stabilizing this building?
I think that their conditional approval is exactly that. It's conditional approval on local support. When we have the local support, we are ready to move forward.
Okay, and last question. In a perfect world, all of this is approved, you've got all your money in your hand. When does this start?
We are anticipating about 4 weeks to mobilize. That's to do our building permits, place the appropriate insurance, get our contract signed with our builder. So that would be 4 weeks from the date that we have the go-ahead with the local funding, and then approximately a 10-week construction timeline. So it's, should be done by the summer. We're also, based on our timeline, projecting to go into the state with a June application for funding for the permanent phase. So we'll be working on pre-development activities for the permanent phase concurrent with the stabilization.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Yeah. Alderman DeLucia.
Mr. Troger, would you come to the podium, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for being here this late tonight. So let's say they green-light the project. Give me a breakdown or a quick timeline of what your expectations and what will be required of them before the first contractor touches the first brick in that building.
To my understanding, at this point in time, I have no indication of what they're planning to do in the way of stabilization. My experience in that building is severely, severely deteriorated. And I'm sure their contractor has some thought in mind, but we would want to review some plans, some method, and if any, and I don't know if all of it's temporary, if some of it's going to be permanent. If we're putting a new roof on, I assume that would be a permanent part of this work. I'd want to have that reviewed, stamped by a structural engineer, that we would be able to issue a permit as a permanent part of the work. Again, we're going to need a little review time to look at what they submit. As of this point, I've seen nothing. So to answer your question, we would have to issue some writs, which may be somewhat of a delay in starting the work. I'd like to think it wouldn't be. I don't know how far along they're prepared because I haven't seen anything.
So, and this might be an unfair question, and I accept that, but in a project of this magnitude, based on your experience, how long would that review process by your office before you issue that permit take?
Depends on the extent, again, it depends on the extent of the work. The floor systems in there are extremely unsafe, along with the area that's already collapsed. I'm having trouble visualizing how this is going to be accomplished. I'm sure that she has contractors that have the expertise to do this, but it's tough for me to answer your questions without knowing the entire scope of what's planned in the way of, quote, stabilization, whatever that may mean.
I completely understand. Thank you.
Great.
So, I'm educated and trained in this business, and I know the difference, as many people in this room and in the public know the difference between an architect's schematic plan of what a building's going to look like if all things go as planned, and the hard working drawings that the architect has stamped, that engineers have reviewed, mechanical, electrical, structural, all down the road. That is an entirely different iteration. I know this building department well enough. That's the kind of scope and magnitude of the drawings that are going to be expected. So I'm starting to feel a little bit nervous. I'm going to say what I intended to say, and then I promise I will tie a ribbon around the whole thing. I am looking at this from a purely pragmatic point of view. I have absolutely no emotional attachment to this building. Yes, my mother used to take me there to get my Cub Scout uniforms. That's about it, okay? But looking at this from a pragmatic point of view, I saw, coming into this chamber, I saw three options. I saw that we said yes, and the project moves forward, and we at least get a building to the point where the roof integrity is restored, structurally, the structural components are restored, and we stop being such a bad neighbor to the two buildings that are adjacent to it, because we know that there are issues there. And At that point, everybody's happy and the Women's Institute takes possession of the building. And it gets back on the grand list. Or, second option, we say no and we prepare to bond up to $1 million to demolish this building. And I know quotes came in at 6 this and 650 this and whatever the case may be. Listen, by the time this gets done, if we want to tear this thing down, it's going to be $1 million because we're going to go to we're going to have litigation involved. There's going to be delay, and demolition on this scale, I can imagine, is going to have all kinds of unforeseen issues that are just going to equal dollar signs. We could also say no and do nothing, which means that all we'd be doing is waiting for litigation to happen when something goes sideways with this building and we're responsible for it. We already have other things going on with the neighboring buildings, with the parking behind, and so on and so forth. So I really didn't see a lot of options to saying yes to the $150,000, but based on what Alderwoman Gould just asked and what was answered, I am really nervous about the real possibility that this can come to fruition. I'm scared of this thing. So, and with that, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further comment? Alderman Browning.
If I could have the Women's Institute representative up. So contractually, what happens if we give you the $150,000 and your board does not approve the $450,000? What happens next?
Okay, let me back up one step and address sort of the development timeline, because I understand that there are some questions on the timeline and the scope and how this all gets accomplished quickly. This is all laid out in the terms of our development agreement, which is very specific as to having 120 days the Women's Institute has from the date that all financing is approved to complete the stabilization efforts. So there are time periods built in here in terms of the review process for the building permits and any structural work that needs to be done. It's a long and complicated development agreement. I can tell that the attorneys have put a lot of thought into making sure that it's something that's achievable by the Women's Institute as well as achievable by the city. So that there is a tight 120-day timeline to complete the stabilization efforts on the Women's Institute. We do think that's achievable. We won't close on our loans until we're sure that this is going forward. And that's just good business practice.
So your board needs to approve the $450,000, and we need to do the $150,000, or essentially there's no deal.
Correct.
And if your board does not approve the $450,000, it's your interpretation of the contract that the Women's Institute can end the deal?
I'd be hesitant to speak for my board without them here, but I think that, we are very optimistic that we can move forward quickly to get this building stabilized, and our board has been tremendously supportive of those efforts. As developers, we are used to taking risks. We are used to seeing projects with these types of complexities. Our board is asking questions on this project because of the unusual nature of bifurcating the stabilization from their permanent construction. But this is something that we're very used to doing.
Okay. I don't want to ask you another question, but I'll just make a quick statement. I think that this is politically, it'll be very difficult if the 150 is not enough for us to allocate more money. $150,000 was taken out of the is being projected to be taken out of the Public Works Department, which is due for road paving. It will not affect us this year, but within the next 2 to 3 years, that money would have been slated to be used for roads. Potentially, I think we can handle that. But what the real difficulty is if we come back here about a month from now and it's like, okay, we need to generate $450,000. It's like, okay, which account do we raid then? And at that point, that would, in my personal opinion, that would be the weight that broke the camel's back. I mean, that's the level. I mean, I'm not going to bore you with the budgetary problems we're having in Norwich, but they are rather substantial. I know that Mr. Grippo raised the issue of why is the YMCA in the condition it is, besides the fact that we don't own it. It's literally, we cannot take on, even if we were to own it, we could not float a project of that magnitude, given the budgetary pressures we're under right now. So I guess what I'm hearing, do you feel comfortable saying that at least in this phase, you will not come back for more money than $150,000?
You know, we're surprised and pleased with the city's willingness to come forward with $150,000. I wouldn't have come to you to ask for that, and I wouldn't anticipate coming to ask for additional funding, no.
Okay. I mean, I'm only speaking for myself. I think that realistically, given what the price would be for us to obtain it from another account in another department, I don't see where we would obtain it from. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Is there further comment? Alderman Burnham?
Thank you, and thank you for coming. I have a statement and then a question. I think it's nice to see the sea change of how we address an unforeseen, unbudgeted project, given that everything I've heard to date has been no money, no money, no money. And I hope that unilaterally that we would apply some of these parameters for some similar projects that might come up that are just as vital to our community. So just remembering that. So thank you for doing that. And thank you, Alderman Browning, for addressing the Public Works question. That was my question to our staff. And for the Women's Institute, are you concurrently going after funding? Because this is all for stabilization, and I share, some of my colleagues' concern here with the risk that we're taking on. Are you concurrently seeking out funding for restoration?
So the state deadlines, this project will be eligible for historic tax credits. That's going to be the key component that make this project work, as well as low-income housing tax credits. There is a state deadline for that in June. We are hopeful that we will make the June deadline. There's a lot of due diligence that needs to happen in terms of market studies, environmental studies, in order to make that June deadline. So we've started marshaling our resources to understand what it's going to take in terms of getting our architecturals for the stabilization to 90% to make the June deadline. The next deadline for those state funds is December, which obviously is going to create further delays in the permanent construction side of the project. So there are no applications that are outstanding now, but we have started doing our research and our homework.
And one more question that you said, and it's just for my clarification. We mentioned that our money is last in, and you had mentioned that your board has not, and maybe won't, give permission to use the full $450,000 of the full recourse loan. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there is, you did hear that correctly. I think that there is some work that needs to be done on the legal side in terms of lien priority. We have a couple funders that want lien priority. The development agreement allows us the ability to take title of the property with 20 days notice to the city. I think this is all going to be hashed out in the amendment to the development agreement in terms of the flow of funds and making sure that we can satisfy the commitments of all of our funders, with the city being one of them.
Is there further concern? Yes, Alderwoman Filbert.
I thank you for being here. Although I applaud your efforts, I'm acutely aware of the problem of homelessness among veterans. I have a brother who's a Vietnam vet who was homeless for a period of time. I cannot in good conscience support this at this point in time. There are just too many variables. There are too many unknowns. The city itself created this problem. Not the current council, not the last council, going back many, many years. We did not do our due diligence, and now it has come home to roost. I wish that you could find your own funding, but I am not in a position right now. I do not feel comfortable encumbering taxpayer money for this project. There are many other things in the city of Norwich that need to be done. There are many other buildings that could be utilized for the same purpose. And I am an advocate and a lover of history. Norwich has incredible history. But at some point in time, we have to make the difficult choices So I will not be supporting this, but I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that you are able to find, someone jokingly said, or maybe not jokingly said, have you considered a GoFundMe page? There are many, many people that support you. And if every one of those people gave $100 or $500, you might be amazed at how much money you would amass in a relatively short period of time. So as I say, I wish you the best of luck. Your efforts are admirable, but I cannot, at this point in time, support it based upon the variables. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further comment? Alderwoman Gould?
Okay. Going to put 20 units of housing, or that's proposed,
Yep.
with retail on the first floor. It's been a lot of talk about, well, this is going to be just like the Warwick, and we're going to revitalize this building. Tell me about the taxability of this building, because for all of you to know that are sitting out in the audience, the Warwick, while it has been refurbished and was beautifully done, the Warwick pays less than $5,000 a year in property tax. So if we are going to put the full faith and credit of $150,000 into the Reed and Hughes building, tell everybody here who's listening at home or in the newspaper, how is this building going to be on the tax rolls and be a tax generator for the city of Norwich?
So you heard me say in the citizen comment part that the Women's Institute is a nonprofit, and I know typically nonprofits don't pay taxes. So your question is a good one. The way historic tax credit deals get done and low-income housing tax credit deals get done, just the legal structure of them is that they are held by special purpose entities, for-profit entities, because there has to be a development partner that's admitted that owns the tax credits. So they are taxable entities. And we are modeling that this property will be taxed based on the current mill rate for its years of operation.
And that's fully taxable.
Absolutely. We're not planning on asking for any tax abatements at this time.
Okay. And I'm going to take another bite of this question again. When will, if the council votes this evening to give you the $150,000, I'm a little nervous about this because I was a proponent of taking the building down when we had nobody who was interested in developing the building. We've given you time. I'm slowly warming to the project, but I'm worried about our $150,000 if your $450,000 of pending funds doesn't come through. Do you see that if you don't get the $450,000 in full recourse loan, that this project is sort of dead in the water, for lack of a better term?
I think your question is a good one, but I think, we have the $450,000 full recourse loan committed. It has a 3-year time period. Our board is hopeful that we don't have to use the full amount towards the stabilization, but that's an active commitment that we have, and, we signed the commitment letter to them. So I don't have any concerns about it, no.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Browning.
So technically, regardless of what the contract is saying, it appears your institute's position is that the $150,000 will not be the last money in. It will be at least used before the $450,000 recourse loan, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and that loan requires us taking title. So the way the resolution is worded, it includes that it'll be the last money in after the grant funds, which would exclude full recourse loans.
Alderman DeLucia.
So that brings another challenge to my attention, because this resolution is written that the expenditure of the city funds will result in the stabilization of the Reed and Hughes building, but what we're hearing is maybe not, and you may have to dip into the $450,000 after in order to make that happen. So the city's money could be expended, and the money out of that additional 450 might be approved, might not be approved.
Once we have a signed commitment with our contractor, we are in, right? We're not going to get halfway through a signed contract with a builder and walk away from the property. We're making commitments to you, we're making commitments to the builder to fulfill the terms of the commitment and to fulfill the terms of our development agreement. Under the terms of our development agreement, we can take title with 20 days written notice. We will need to do that during the stabilization period. We're just not going to do it at the beginning of the stabilization period. We're going to fully expend our grant funds first before we take title.
Well, I'm just going to say it, that to me that doesn't to me that doesn't represent the city's money being the last money in. To me, the 150 is to say we've gone through all of our money. We need another 100 grand to get over the hurdle, and that's what the up to the $150,000 is available for. So I'll just close with this. I try to operate under, if I'm not sure what to do, I do nothing and wait to see what comes to me. And to me, there are just too many moving parts to this right now. I have some serious concerns. I want to be able to vote yes. I really do. I'm just not seeing all the parts fit together.
So I can certainly understand your perspective, and as a developer that has completed similar deals to this, there is always a period that feels a little scary and it feels a little uncertain, and you're trying to make all the pieces fit together. But the Women's Institute has a very successful track record in making projects happen. We don't abandon projects midstream. We're not a for-profit developer. We're not in there looking to make a bottom line profit. We're not looking at the ROI. We're looking to provide housing and to revitalize communities. So I know that fear, but as a developer, it's a risk that we are used to managing. And we get through this scary period. And then we're at the groundbreaking, and then we're at the ribbon cutting, and nobody remembers this scary period. It happens, but you have to see the future.
And I'm trying not to be short-sighted.
But
frankly.
we're here to take that risk. That's why you have a nonprofit developer standing at the table, because we have the experience and the track record to move it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
President Pro Tem Nash.
I just have one quick question and a question for City Corporate Counsel. We give you the 450, you get in there, and all of a sudden a catastrophic... 150, I'm sorry, what did I say? 450. I'm sorry, 150.
Yes,
I don't know.
great.
No. Listen, I'm really struggling giving money to this project as it is, okay? Because that was the one stipulation I had made supporting this, was that you weren't going to ask for money. And I understand that you didn't necessarily ask for it. We kind of stepped up and said, we can give you this. But my quick question is this. If you get in there and find out, oops, oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to do this, where's our 150? Are we going to get that back? So I'll ask you that question.
I think we'll know very quickly if we're not able to go forward. All the structural and engineering reports that I've read to date, and our contractor and our architect, they feel very confident that this building will easily be stabilized. And for every floor that you stabilize, they're going to work from the bottom up. For every floor that you stabilize, the building gets more and more sound. They're going to get in there on Thursday, hopefully see that there hasn't been massive deterioration, and we'll know pretty quickly.
Okay. The other question I have then to Mr. Mayor and Corporate Counsel, can we amend this resolution to say that our 150 is stipulated on the fact that they get the 450. We will commit 150 if they get the board to approve their 450.
I understand that they've already got the commitment from the lender of the 450, whatever it is, and that the board was concerned about the contingencies.
Into the microphone.
Okay, the contingency of the transfer and the stabilization aspect of, there's 250 towards the stabilization. It looks like the city's 150 is the next level. Then there is the funding from the $450,000. All of this is contingent. The resolution you're voting on tonight is John being able to negotiate a satisfactory agreement with the Women's Institute and bringing that back to the council on April 2nd for your consideration. So you are technically appropriating $150,000, but you're not spending any of it until such time as you are satisfied with whatever the agreement is. Some of these questions that were raised tonight may be able to be resolved in that manner, particularly the sequencing, including, I gather, that the contractor is going in later this week to look at it, which may or may not be instructive.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Browning.
Thank you. This is more of a this is more of a question to the sponsors of this resolution, which is, would you be interested in removing the language which specifically says, it being the intention of the council that any funding from the city, whether the secured or otherwise, be spent after all the applicable grant funding, and only if, because that is, if we pass this as is, we already know that the Women's Institute will not be able to abide by that.
By the grant funding, I think we're talking about the $250,000 that they've indicated that they've committed, whether that's by way of a loan or grant. I guess we've described it as grant funding, but from what was said tonight, it may be some of it is loaned, under what terms I don't know. And then there'd be the $150,000 from the city. Then there would be the additional funding, which could be used for stabilization, or whatever the purpose, the understanding between the Women's Institute and the lender is.
So are you saying that because this is the 150 is a grant and they are dealing with a recourse loan, that the current resolution is still in compliance with what they're proposing?
My understanding is that this was all grants, but apparently it may not be. Maybe some of it is loaned. I don't know. It's non-recourse loans, I gather, which if the building can't be stabilized, I guess it's almost the equivalent of a grant. But that, that's where it stands. So you could remove the word grant funding, but the recourse funding, which would require the city to transfer the property to Women's Institute, I would assume that it has to be first-level financing so that the city would be requested to subordinate. If we were to take a mortgage on the property, since we own the property, it's somewhat unusual to...
Could I get a yes or no answer?
I guess the question is, it isn't easy to answer yes or no. That's why I'm...
Well, I mean, without being... Is the language in the current resolution, number 8, does that still comply with what they are explaining how they're going to handle finances?
Other than the reference to loans, I thought it did. Since she's referred to loans, I'm not sure that grant is the appropriate term to use, and that's the question.
I didn't hear a yes or a no.
Well, and that's why I've answered it that way, because it depends on what I haven't seen any of the paperwork with respect to those documents as to what they provide, so I can't answer it as a yes or no. I don't know if Ms. Rogers is in a better position to answer it than I am.
I mean, I think that some of the questions that have been asked are going to be part of the amendment to the development agreement, and they are legal questions, and there's fine nuances between, the words non-recourse loan and recourse loan. They all mean slightly different things. I think that the way the resolution is worded, it gives a lot of latitude to this to be worked out in the terms of the development agreement. And I'm not a lawyer, and the development agreement was crafted by lawyers, approved by us, signed by us, but it's a negotiation between councils ultimately.
Move the question. Move the question.
I have some things to say, thank you.
Oh.
I think all the questions have been great, because this is a difficult issue. The reason for this resolution is to continue to explore for 2 more weeks the ability to have the city address this issue, this building, with a partner. Without them, we do it alone. And from a taxpayer perspective, Alderman DeLucia, you already pointed out what that risk is. It's well in 7 figures by ourselves. The resolution is seeking a 2-week time period to have the questions that were put on the floor today hopefully answered to the full satisfaction of each council member. And if they're not, you get another bite at this same apple in 2 weeks, because this is not final approval tonight. This is simply asking for the negotiations to amend the current development agreement. That's all we're asking. The good questions that were asked tonight by everyone are important, and I'm sure for the benefit of this project, they need to be addressed to everyone's satisfaction. We're the owners of this property. I don't know where we get off not being a responsible landlord or property owner, but for 23+ years, the city has been just that, irresponsible. The fact that we have a developer with a track record as strong and as solid as them willing to work with us on this at the 11th hour, to me is still amazing. If you want to go alone, go alone. But understand that you're going to send $1 million bill to the taxpayers over an issue of negotiating language? That's not being fiscally responsible. People have brought and interjected other issues like budget issues. And yeah, they're all solidly important. But you know what? If we have to bond monies to fix this up on our own, because that demolition bond cannot be applied, that's for demolition. And if you think we're going to do that overnight, as some people have interjected and said to me over the course of this discussion, that's not happening. We're going to court. And I don't see us winning that battle either when it comes down to it. So you can spend several $100,000 in litigation, lose, then go out and bond a restoration all on our own. Instead, we have a developer who has been tasked repeatedly to come back here more than once, more than twice, a third time, and so forth. And they've come back with $250,000 that we didn't have when we first had these discussions. They have a commitment on that LISC loan, and I'm sure they will use portions of it. And that's the point. It's a partnership. That's what we're gaining here, not going out alone on this. In the litigation, mind you, will be delay after delay after delay. And all the liability issues that other people have mentioned on this floor, they're real. And how much longer they'll be unmaterialized, I do not know. But we have an opportunity to put this issue to bed, finally, after more than 2 decades. And I hope we take that opportunity. Again, tonight is just to negotiate language. Come back. If your questions aren't answered, ask more. This is not final approval. Thank you. All those in favor of the resolution? 1, 2, 3, 6 opposed. Motion carries 6-1. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second by President Pro Tem Nash. All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Unanimous. We are adjourned.
I just want to ask you one question. Why
of other people